The convenience store on Maple Street wasn't the kind of place where anything dramatic ever happened. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting their sterile glow across rows of chips and canned soup. The floor tiles were cracked but clean, and the bell above the door chimed the same cheerful note, whether you were buying milk or lottery tickets. It was ordinary, predictable, safe. Until it wasn't. Maya stood behind the counter that Tuesday evening, her fingers drumming absently against the worn laminate as she waited for the clock to inch closer to closing time. At 28, she had worked here for 3 years, long enough to know every customer by name, every product by its place on the shelf. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her green apron hung loose over faded jeans. She was saving for nursing school, had been saving for what felt like forever, each paycheck bringing her incrementally closer to a dream that sometimes felt too far away to touch. The store was nearly empty, just her, the hum of the refrigerators, and Mrs. Patterson browsing the cereal aisle with the careful deliberation of someone who had all the time in the world. Maya smiled to herself, watching the elderly woman compare nutritional labels through thick glasses. Some things never changed. Then the bell chimed. 3 men entered. The first thing Maya noticed was how they moved, too quickly, too deliberately, their eyes scanning the store with predatory precision. The second thing she noticed was the gun. "Nobody move," the tallest one said, his voice flat and cold as winter concrete. He wore a black hoodie pulled low over his face, but she could see his eyes, dark and empty. "Open the register." Now. Maya's heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands began to shake as she reached for the register, her training evaporating in the face of actual terror. She had been told what to do in situations like this: comply, don't be a hero, let them take what they want. But knowing what to do and actually doing it when a gun was pointed at your chest were 2 entirely different things. "Faster!" the man barked. Her fingers fumbled with the keys, pressing wrong buttons, her vision blurring at the edges. The drawer finally popped open with a mechanical ding that sounded absurdly cheerful. "Put it in the bag. All of it." She started pulling bills out with trembling hands, shoving them into the plastic bag he'd thrown at her. 20s, 10s, 5s. Her entire week's worth of wages, the store's daily earnings, everything. That's when she heard it. A small, terrified voice from aisle 3. "Mommy, I'm scared." Maya's blood turned to ice. She had forgotten. In the back corner, near the juice boxes and granola bars, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old, with blonde pigtails and a pink backpack shaped like a bunny. She had come in with her mother just before the men arrived, asking in her sweet, piping voice if they could please buy the cookies with the purple package. The second gunman spun toward the sound, his weapon rising. "Who else is here?" he shouted. "Get out here, now." A woman emerged from the aisle, her face drained of color, pulling her daughter behind her protectively. The little girl was crying now, soft, whimpering sobs that tore at something deep in Maya's chest. "Please," the mother whispered, her voice breaking. "Please, she's just a child." "Shut up," the third man snarled, moving toward them. "Both of you, on the floor." Now. The little girl's sobs grew louder, more panicked. Her mother tried to shield her, wrapping her arms around the small body as they sank to the cold linoleum. "Mommy, I'm scared," the child cried again, her face buried in her mother's shoulder. Maya's hands stilled on the money. She looked at the little girl, at the way her small fingers clutched her mother's jacket, at the sheer terror in her young eyes, and something inside her shifted. This wasn't just a robbery anymore. This was a child, learning what fear really meant, a moment that would mark her forever. The first gunman was growing impatient. "Hurry up!" he shouted at Maya, slamming his hand on the counter. That's when the bell chimed again. Everyone froze. A man stood in the doorway, his hand still on the handle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a faded denim jacket and work boots dusted with sawdust. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the collar, and there was a tiredness around his eyes that spoke of long days and longer nights. He looked like he'd just come from a construction site, which he had. For a moment, nobody moved. The man's eyes took in the scene with startling clarity. The guns, the terrified woman and child on the floor, Maya behind the counter with her hands full of stolen money. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Get on the floor!" the tallest gunman screamed, swinging his weapon toward the newcomer. "Now!" The man didn't move. He stood perfectly still, his gaze shifting from the gunman to the crying child and back again. Maya watched his hands, calloused and strong, slowly rise to shoulder height in a gesture of surrender. "Okay," he said calmly, his voice deep and steady. "Okay, just take it easy." "I said get on the floor." The man took a slow step forward instead, and Maya's heart leaped into her throat. What was he doing? This wasn't the time to be brave. This was the time to survive. "Look," the man said, his tone conversational, almost gentle, "I can see you guys are in a tough spot. You need money. You're stressed. I get it." The second gunman laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You get it? You don't know anything about us." "Maybe not," the man conceded, taking another careful step. "But I know that little girl over there is terrified. I know her mom is trying to protect her. And I know that whatever you're going through, whatever brought you here tonight, you don't want to hurt a kid." "We're not going to hurt anyone if people just do what we say," the first gunman snapped. But there was something in his voice now, a hairline crack in his certainty. The man nodded slowly. "Then let me help. Let the woman and the girl leave. I'll stay. You can take whatever you want from the register, and I won't move. I promise." Maya stared at him, stunned. Was he seriously offering himself as a hostage? For strangers? The tallest gunman hesitated, his weapon wavering slightly. "Why would you do that?" The man's eyes flicked to the little girl still sobbing in her mother's arms, and something achingly soft crossed his face. "Because I'm a father," he said quietly. "And if that was my daughter on that floor, I'd want someone to step forward for her." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hold their breath. Maya watched the man's face, really looked at him for the first time. There was grief there, old and deep, etched into the lines around his mouth, the shadows beneath his eyes. This wasn't bravado. This wasn't some hero complex. This was a man who understood fear and loss in ways most people never would. The little girl's crying had quieted to hiccuping breaths. Her mother held her tighter, hope and terror warring in her expression. "Please," the man said again, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let them go." The first gunman looked at his companions, some unspoken communication passing between them. Finally, he jerked his head toward the door. "Fine, get out, both of you, now." The mother didn't need to be told twice. She scooped her daughter into her arms and ran, the little girl's pink backpack bouncing against her back as they fled into the night. The bell chimed their exit, almost mockingly cheerful. The man exhaled slowly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. He looked at Maya, and for just a moment their eyes met. There was something in his gaze that made her throat tighten, reassurance, determination, and beneath it all, a bone-deep weariness that spoke of battles already fought and lost. "Now you," the gunman said, pointing at the man, "on the floor, hands behind your head." The man complied, lowering himself slowly to his knees, then flat on the ground, his movements careful and non-threatening. Maya could see his jaw clenched, the muscles in his neck tight with controlled fear. "You," the gunman barked at Maya, "finish emptying that register. Everything. Lottery tickets, too." Her hands resumed their shaking work, pulling out the last of the bills, the rolls of quarters from beneath the tray, the whole drawer. The gunman snatched the bag from her hands. "Smart girl," he said. Then he looked down at the man on the floor. "You're either really brave or really stupid. The man didn't respond. The three gunmen backed toward the door, weapons still raised. The bell chimed as they pushed through, and then they were gone, disappearing into the darkness beyond the parking lot lights. For several long seconds, neither Maya nor the man moved. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the hum of refrigerators and the distant wail of sirens someone must have already called. Finally, the man pushed himself up slowly, wincing slightly as he got to his feet. He brushed sawdust and dirt from his jeans with hands that trembled just slightly, the only outward sign of what he'd just endured. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking at Maya with genuine concern. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Then she shook her head. Then she started crying, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest. The man moved behind the counter without asking permission, and before Maya knew what was happening, she was wrapped in a hug that smelled like wood shavings and coffee and safety. He held her while she cried, one hand patting her back awkwardly, the way someone who was used to comforting children might comfort an adult. "It's okay," he murmured. "It's over. You're safe now." When she finally pulled back, wiping her eyes with her apron, she got her first real look at him. He was probably in his mid-30s, with kind eyes the color of warm honey and a scar that cut through his left eyebrow. There was something gentle about him despite his size, something that made her think of oak trees and quiet strength. "Thank you," she whispered. "What you did, stepping forward like that was terrifying," he finished with a wry smile. "Yeah, I know. Why did you do it?" The smile faded. He looked away toward the spot where the mother and daughter had been, and was quiet for a long moment. "My daughter's name was Lily," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "She had blonde hair, too, loved pink, had this laugh that sounded like bells." He paused, swallowing hard. 3 years ago, she and my wife were in a car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. They didn't make it." Maya's hand flew to her mouth. "I'm so sorry." He nodded, still not looking at her. That little girl tonight, when she said, "Mommy, I'm scared," it was... He trailed off, unable to finish. "Lily's voice," Maya whispered. "Yeah." He finally met her eyes again, and they were wet. "I couldn't just stand there. I couldn't let another father lose his family if there was something, anything, I could do to stop it." The sirens were closer now, red and blue lights beginning to paint the parking lot in urgent colors. Police cars screeched to a halt outside, and suddenly the store was filled with officers, questions, chaos. Through it all, Maya kept glancing at the man. He stood to the side, answering questions in that same calm, steady voice, his hands in his pockets. When an officer asked for his name, she heard him say, "Daniel Foster." It took nearly 2 hours to give statements, review security footage, and process everything that had happened. By the time the last officer left, promising to be in touch with any updates, it was well past midnight. The store was still technically open, but Maya couldn't imagine anyone coming in now. Daniel was sitting on the curb outside, his head in his hands, when she finally emerged. The parking lot was quiet now, just the buzz of streetlights and the distant sound of traffic. "Hey," she said softly, sitting down beside him. He looked up, managed a tired smile. "Hey, I never properly introduced myself. I'm Maya." "Nice to meet you, Maya." He paused. "Weird circumstances, though." She laughed, a sound that felt strange after everything. "Yeah, definitely not a typical Tuesday." They sat in silence for a moment, watching moths circle the streetlight. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said. "Sure." "Do you have anyone? I mean, after what happened to your family, is there someone taking care of you?" Daniel was quiet for so long she thought maybe he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I have a son." "Then?" "He's 5 now. It's just been the 2 of us for 3 years." Maya's heart clenched. "I can't imagine how hard that must be." "Some days are better than others," he admitted. Tonight, leaving him with a babysitter to grab some milk and bread, only to walk into that. He shook his head. All I could think was, what if something happens to me? What if he loses both parents? But you stepped forward anyway. Because of him, actually, Daniel said. I want Ethan to grow up knowing that when someone needs help, when a child is scared, you don't look away. You don't wait for someone else to act. You step forward, even when it's terrifying. Maya looked at this man, this stranger who had risked everything for people he didn't know, and felt something shift in her chest. The world was full of people who talked about doing the right thing. Daniel Foster actually did it. Your son is lucky to have you, she said. He smiled, sad and sweet. I hope so. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water. Join the club, Maya said. Single, working 2 jobs, trying to save for nursing school. Some days I'm not sure I'm going to make it. But you keep trying. But I keep trying, she agreed. They sat there on that curb, 2 people bound by trauma and chance, and talked until the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn. Maya learned that Daniel was a carpenter who specialized in custom furniture, that he coached Ethan's soccer team even though he knew nothing about soccer, that his favorite meal was grilled cheese because it was the only thing he could cook that Ethan would actually eat without complaint. Daniel learned that Maya volunteered at a children's hospital on her days off, that she collected vintage teacups from thrift stores, that she sang off-key in the car and didn't care who heard. When the sun finally crested the horizon, painting the parking lot in shades of gold and pink, Daniel stood and offered Maya his hand. I should get home, he said. Babysitter's probably wondering if I disappeared. Maya took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Thank you again for what you did tonight. Thank you for being brave enough to stand there and face them, he countered. That took real courage. She laughed softly. I was terrified. So was I. He paused, seemed to wrestle with something, then pulled a worn business card from his wallet. Look, this might be weird, but if you ever need anything, furniture fixed, a shelf hung, or just someone who understands what it's like to go through something traumatic, give me a call. Maya took the card, running her thumb over the embossed letters. Daniel Foster, Custom Carpentry. I mean it, he said. No job too small. She smiled. I'll keep that in mind. He started toward a beat-up pickup truck in the corner of the lot, then turned back. Maya? Yeah? You're going to make an amazing nurse someday. Before she could respond, he was in his truck, the engine rumbling to life. She watched him drive away as the sun rose higher, his card still clutched in her hand. Maya didn't know it then, but that card would change everything. 3 days passed before Maya found herself staring at Daniel's business card again. It sat on her kitchen counter, slightly creased from being carried in her pocket, the edges soft from her nervous fingers, tracing the embossed letters over and over. The robbery had left marks she hadn't expected. She startled at sudden noises, found herself checking over her shoulder in empty parking lots, woke, gasping from dreams where guns were pointed at children who all had blonde pigtails and pink backpacks. The store manager had given her a week off, urged her to talk to someone, process what had happened. But processing meant sitting alone in her tiny apartment with nothing but her thoughts, and her thoughts kept circling back to the same place, the man who had stepped forward when everyone else, including her, had frozen. Finally, on Thursday afternoon, she picked up her phone and dialed the number before she could talk herself out of it. It rang 3 times. Then a slightly out-of-breath voice answered. Daniel Foster. Hi, this is Maya from the convenience store? There was a pause, then his voice softened with recognition. Maya, hey, are you okay? She started, then stopped. Actually, I don't know. I keep replaying it in my head, the guns, that little girl crying, you stepping forward. I can't sleep. Yeah, he said quietly. I've been there. After the accident, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing headlights. How did you get through it? He was silent for a moment, and she heard what sounded like hammering in the background, then the creak of a door closing. Honestly, I didn't, not alone. I talked to someone, a grief counselor, and I stayed busy. Threw myself into work, into being there for Ethan. Some days that's all you can do, just keep moving forward until one day you realize you've walked far enough that it doesn't hurt quite as much to breathe. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. I called because... I know this is going to sound strange, but you're the only person who was there, who understands what it felt like in that moment. And I just needed to hear a voice that wasn't telling me I should be over it already, or asking if I'm going back to work. You're not strange, Daniel said firmly. You're processing trauma. And there's no timeline for that, no matter what anyone tells you. He paused. Have you eaten today? The question caught her off guard. No, actually. Neither has Ethan, apparently, because he just informed me that crackers and cheese aren't real lunch. She could hear the smile in his voice. I'm about to take him to this diner near the park. Nothing fancy, just burgers and milkshakes. You want to join us? Maya's first instinct was to say no, to retreat back into her safe, isolated apartment. But something in his easy invitation, the casual way he included her like it was the most natural thing in the world, made her pause. I don't want to intrude on your time with your son. You wouldn't be intruding. Honestly, it might be good for both of us. Ethan's been asking about the brave lady from Daddy's story, and I think being around people who understand might help me too. Okay, Maya heard herself say. Yes, I'd like that. Great. Bernie's Diner on Oak Street. Can you be there in 30 minutes? I'll be there. Bernie's Diner was exactly the kind of place that looked like it hadn't changed since 1975. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, and a jukebox in the corner that probably still played actual records. The smell of grilled onions and fresh coffee hit Maya the moment she walked through the door. She spotted Daniel immediately. He was sitting in a corner booth, and beside him was a small boy with his father's honey-colored eyes and a gap-toothed grin. The boy was coloring intensely, his tongue poking out in concentration. Daniel saw her and waved, his whole face lighting up in a way that made her chest feel warm. "Maya," he called, "over here." She slid into the booth across from them, suddenly nervous. The boy looked up from his coloring book and studied her with the unfiltered curiosity only 5-year-olds possessed. "Are you the lady who was brave?" he asked. Maya blinked. I don't know about brave. Daddy said you were really brave when the bad men came. He said you kept everyone safe." "Your daddy was the brave one," Maya said, looking at Daniel. "He's the one who helped the scared little girl and her mommy." Ethan nodded seriously. "Daddy's the bravest. But he said you were brave too, so you must be." The logic was irrefutable in the way only a child's logic could be. Daniel's ears had turned slightly pink. "Ethan, this is Miss Maya. Maya, this is my son, Ethan." "Hi, Ethan," Maya said, offering her hand across the table. Ethan shook it solemnly, then immediately returned to his coloring. "I'm drawing a dragon," he announced. "Want to help?" Before Maya could answer, he'd pushed a purple crayon across the table to her and turned his coloring book so they could both reach it. For the next 10 minutes, while they waited for their food, Maya colored dragon scales, while Ethan narrated an elaborate story about a dragon who was afraid of the dark, but learned to be brave by helping his friends. She caught Daniel watching them, something soft and bittersweet in his expression. When their burgers arrived, Ethan launched into a detailed account of his day at kindergarten, complete with dramatic reenactments of how his friend Tyler fell off the monkey bars but didn't cry, and how Miss Jennifer let him be line leader because he remembered to raise his hand. Maya found herself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in days. There was something healing about Ethan's innocent enthusiasm, the way his world still made sense in simple categories of fair and unfair, scary and safe, sad and happy. "So, Miss Maya," Ethan said, carefully dipping a French fry in ketchup, "do you have kids?" "Ethan," Daniel said gently, Remember we talked about how some questions might make people sad? It's okay, Maya said quickly. No, Ethan, I don't have kids, but I really like them. That's why I'm studying to be a nurse, so I can help take care of kids when they're sick. Ethan's eyes went wide. Like a superhero? Kinda like that, yeah. Cool, Ethan declared, taking this as the highest endorsement. Daddy makes furniture. That's cool too, but not as cool as a superhero. Daniel laughed. Thanks, buddy. Good to know where I rank. After lunch, Ethan spotted the small playground adjacent to the diner and looked up at his father with pleading eyes. Please? Just for a little bit? Daniel checked his watch, then looked at Maya. You mind? Not at all. They followed Ethan out to the playground, a modest setup with a slide, a set of swings, and a climbing structure shaped like a castle. Ethan made a beeline for the swings, and before Maya knew what was happening, Daniel had gently maneuvered her toward the empty swing beside his son. When's the last time you were on a swing? He asked, that half-smile playing at his lips. I honestly can't remember. Then you're overdue. She sat down, gripping the chains, and Daniel gave her a gentle push, then another. Soon she was swinging, the wind in her hair, her feet kicking out toward the sky, and she felt something inside her loosen, some tight knot of fear and stress, unwinding just a little. Beside her, Ethan was pumping his legs enthusiastically, shrieking with laughter every time he went high enough that his stomach dropped. Daniel stood behind them, taking turns giving them pushes, and Maya looked back at him, catching his eye. He was smiling, really smiling, and she realized this was probably the first time he'd looked genuinely happy since they'd met. After the swings, Ethan wanted to show Maya how he could climb to the very top of the castle structure. Daniel stood below, arms ready to catch him, calling out encouragement and warnings in equal measure. That's great, buddy. Careful of that loose board. Yes, you've got it. Both hands. Remember? Maya watched the easy rhythm between father and son, the trust and love so evident in every interaction, and felt something crack open in her chest. This man who had lost everything still showed up every day for his child, still found joy in playgrounds and colored dragons, still stepped forward when others needed help, even when he was barely holding himself together. When Ethan finally conquered the castle and stood at the top, arms raised in victory, both adults cheered. The boy's face was pure sunshine. Did you see? Did you see, Daddy? Miss Maya? We saw? Maya called. You were amazing. The bravest climber in all the land, Daniel added, his voice thick with pride. On the walk back to their cars, Ethan's hand found Maya's, small and sticky from French fries, and still slightly grubby from the playground. He swung their joined hands between them, chattering about nothing and everything. When they reached the parking lot, Daniel turned to Maya. Thank you for coming today. I think we both needed this. I definitely did, Maya admitted. I feel lighter than I have in days. Miss Maya? Ethan tugged on her hand. Can you come over sometime? Daddy's going to build me a treehouse, and you could help. You could paint it with me. Maya looked at Daniel, not wanting to overstep. He shrugged, but his eyes were warm. We'd love to have you. Fair warning, though, Ethan's idea of painting involves more paint on himself than on any actual surface. I happen to think that's the best way to paint, Maya said seriously to Ethan. See, Daddy? Miss Maya gets it. They exchanged phone numbers, real ones this time, not just a business card. As Maya drove home, she caught herself smiling at nothing, her fingers tapping against the steering wheel to a song on the radio. For the first time since the robbery, the world felt a little less heavy. Over the next few weeks, Maya's life developed a new rhythm. She returned to work at the convenience store, though the first few shifts made her palms sweat and her heart race. But each day got a little easier. She started seeing the counselor Daniel had recommended, working through the trauma in careful, measured steps. And she started spending time with Daniel and Ethan. It began innocently enough. She'd stop by Daniel's workshop after her shift to drop off coffee, and he'd show her whatever piece he was working on, A dining table with inlaid patterns, a rocking chair smooth as silk, a toy chest carved with woodland creatures for a client's nursery. His hands moved over the wood with reverence, coaxing beauty from grain and knot. Sometimes Ethan would be there, doing homework at a small desk Daniel had built just for him, or playing with wood scraps and pretending to build his own furniture. The boy had taken to Maya instantly, treating her like she'd always been part of their small family. One Saturday, Daniel invited her to Ethan's soccer game. She sat in the bleachers with the other parents, cheering as a group of 5-year-olds chased a ball with more enthusiasm than coordination. Ethan scored a goal, completely by accident, and his face, when he realized what he'd done, made every parent in the stands laugh with delight. After the game, they went for ice cream. Ethan got chocolate with rainbow sprinkles and managed to get it everywhere: his face, his shirt, Daniel's jeans when he climbed into his father's lap for a hug. "You're a mess, buddy," Daniel said, but he was laughing, using napkins to wipe chocolate from his son's nose. "But I scored a goal," Ethan protested. "Goal scorers get to be messy." "Is that a rule?" "It is now." Maya watched them, her heart so full it ached. She was falling in love with this little family, she realized. Not just with Daniel, though the feelings growing in her chest whenever she looked at him were undeniable. But with Ethan, too, with his gap-toothed grin and his absolute certainty that the world was good and fair and full of dragons who just needed a friend. That night, after they'd dropped Ethan off at home with a very patient babysitter named Mrs. Chen, Daniel walked Maya to her car. "Thank you for coming today," he said, hands in his pockets. "It means a lot to Ethan. And to me." "I love spending time with you guys," Maya said honestly. "Ethan's wonderful. You're doing an amazing job with him." Daniel looked down, scuffing his boot against the pavement. "Some days I'm not sure. I worry I'm not enough, that he needs more than just me fumbling through bedtime stories and soccer practices." "Daniel." Maya waited until he looked at her. "That boy adores you. He feels safe and loved and happy. That's not fumbling. That's everything." Something shifted in Daniel's expression, his eyes searching hers in the dim parking lot light. "Maya, He started, then stopped. "Never mind. It's too soon." "Too soon for what?" He shook his head, but he was smiling that soft, sad smile she'd come to recognize. "Nothing. Get home safe, okay?" But as she drove away, watching him in her rearview mirror, she thought she knew what he'd been about to say. And the possibility of it made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with fear. The treehouse project began on a bright Sunday morning in early October. Daniel's backyard was modest but well-maintained, with an old oak tree perfect for building. He'd already constructed the platform during the week, and today was about walls and a roof. Maya arrived to find Ethan practically vibrating with excitement, wearing a tiny tool belt that Daniel had made him. "Miss Maya, you're here. We're building my house in the sky. I can see that. You look very official with that tool belt. Daddy made it special. See?" He pointed to where his name was burned into the leather. "That says Ethan." Very impressive. Daniel emerged from the garage carrying boards and wearing a tool belt of his own. When he saw Maya, his whole face softened. "Morning? Ready to get covered in sawdust?" "I was born ready." They worked together throughout the day, Daniel doing the actual construction while Maya and Ethan handled the painting. True to Daniel's warning, Ethan got more paint on himself than on the wood, but his joy was infectious. He sang while he painted, made up stories about who would visit the treehouse, asked Maya at least 15 times if she thought it was the coolest treehouse ever. The absolute coolest, she assured him each time. During lunch, while Ethan was inside washing paint off his hands, Daniel and Maya sat on the back porch, sandwiches balanced on their laps. "Can I tell you something?" Daniel said quietly. "Of course." "When Lily and Sarah died, I didn't think I'd ever feel normal again. For 2 years, I was just going through the motions, doing what I had to do for Ethan, but not really living. He looked at her, his eyes intense. But these last few weeks, with you here, I've remembered what it feels like to look forward to things, to laugh without it hurting, to imagine a future that isn't just survival. Maya's breath caught. Daniel, I'm not saying this to put pressure on you, he continued. I just wanted you to know what you've given us. Given me. She reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. You've given me something too. After the robbery, I felt broken. But watching you with Ethan, seeing how you show up every day with so much love, despite everything you've lost, it reminded me that healing is possible, that good people still exist in the world. They sat there, hands linked, watching autumn leaves drift across the yard. Ethan's laughter drifted from inside the house, and somewhere a neighbor's dog barked. Everything was ordinary and perfect. Daddy, Miss Maya, come see. I made a handprint turkey on the fridge. They looked at each other and laughed. Duty calls, Daniel said, but he didn't let go of her hand right away. When he finally did, Maya felt the absence of his touch, like a cold spot on her skin. The treehouse was finished by sunset. They stood back, admiring their work, a small wooden structure with yellow walls and a green roof, accessible by a sturdy ladder, with a window where Ethan could look out at his kingdom. It's perfect, Ethan breathed, his eyes huge. Can I sleep in it tonight? How about we save overnight adventures for when it's a little warmer, Daniel suggested diplomatically. But can I go up now? Just for a little bit? Sure, buddy. Go explore. Ethan scrambled up the ladder with the fearlessness of childhood, disappearing into his new domain. Happy shouts echoed from above. Daniel put his arm around Maya's shoulders, pulling her close as they watched. She leaned into him, fitting against his side like she'd always belonged there. Thank you for this, he murmured, for being here. Nowhere else I'd rather be. Above them, Ethan's voice rang out clear and true. This is the best day ever. And standing there in the fading light, paint-splattered and sawdust-covered, Maya thought he might be right, but nothing good lasts forever. The phone call came on a Tuesday 3 months after the robbery. Maya was at work restocking shelves when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally she wouldn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Rivera? This is Detective Patterson. We need you to come down to the station. We've arrested the men from the robbery, and we need you to identify them in a lineup. Her hand started shaking immediately, the box of crackers she'd been holding tumbling to the floor. When? Tomorrow, at 2 p.m., if possible. I know this is difficult, but your testimony is crucial for prosecution. After she hung up, Maya stood frozen in the aisle, crackers scattered around her feet. She'd worked so hard to move past that night, to reclaim her sense of safety, and now she'd have to face them again, look into the eyes of the men who'd pointed guns at her chest. She called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. Hey, I was just thinking about you. Daniel. Her voice cracked. They caught them. The men from the robbery. I have to go to the police station tomorrow and identify them. Silence on the other end, then. Do you want me to come with you? You don't have to. Maya, do you want me to come with you? She closed her eyes, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. Yes, please. Then I'll be there. What time? The next day, Daniel met her outside the police station. He took one look at her pale face and pulled her into a hug, solid and warm and safe. You've got this, Ke, he whispered into her hair, and I'm right here. Inside, Detective Patterson led them to a viewing room. Through one-way glass, Maya could see 5 men standing in a line, each holding a number. Take your time, the detective said. If you recognize any of them, just tell me the number. Maya's hands were clenched so tight, her nails bit into her palms. She looked at each face, and when she got to number 3, her breath stopped. Those eyes. She'd never forget those empty, cold eyes. "Number 3," she whispered. "He's the one who had the gun pointed at me." "Are you certain?" "Yes." Her voice was stronger now. "Number 3." She identified the other two as well. With each identification, she felt Daniel's hand on her back, steady and reassuring. When it was over, when they'd stepped back out into the bright afternoon sunlight, Maya's legs gave out. Daniel caught her, lowering her gently to sit on a nearby bench. "Breathe," he coached. "In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. You're safe. They can't hurt you anymore." She focused on his voice, his hand rubbing circles on her back, and slowly the panic receded. "I did it," she said finally. "You did it. I'm so proud of you." She looked up at him, this man who'd shown up for her again and again, who'd stepped forward when others ran, who'd held her hand through the hardest moments. "Daniel, She stopped, unsure how to put into words everything she felt. But he seemed to understand anyway. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs gently wiping away her tears. "I know," he said softly. "Me too." And right there on a bench outside the police station, he kissed her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Maya was smiling through her tears. "Took you long enough," she teased. He laughed, pressing his forehead to hers. "Yeah, well, some things are worth waiting for." That night, Daniel made dinner at his house, spaghetti, Ethan's favorite. Maya helped set the table while Ethan regaled her with a story about show and tell at school. Over dinner, Daniel cleared his throat. "Ethan, buddy, I want to talk to you about something." Ethan looked up from his pasta, sauce on his chin. "Am I in trouble?" "No, not at all. I wanted to ask you something. How would you feel if Miss Maya started coming around more, like a lot more?" Ethan's face lit up. "Like every day?" "Maybe not every day, but more often. Would that be okay with you?" "Yes." Ethan turned to Maya. "Will you? Will you come every day? We can read stories and build stuff, and you can help me with my treehouse and—" "Slow down, buddy," Daniel laughed. "Let her answer." Maya looked at both of them, these two people who'd become her whole heart, and knew there was only one answer. "I would love that," she said, "more than anything." Ethan cheered, then immediately returned to his spaghetti, like this was the most natural development in the world. Later, after Ethan was in bed, Daniel and Maya sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket against the autumn chill. "I never thought I'd feel this way again," Daniel said quietly. "After losing Sarah and Lily, I thought that part of my life was over. But you brought light back." "You did the same for me," Maya said. "You reminded me that there's still good in the world, that heroes aren't just in stories." He kissed her temple. "You're the hero. Every day you show up, work hard, help people. You're studying to save lives. And today you faced your fear to make sure those men face justice. We're both heroes then," she decided, "just different kinds." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Somewhere inside, Ethan's nightlight glowed, soft and warm. "Maya," Daniel said eventually. "I love you." Her heart swelled so full she thought it might burst. "I love you too." And there, on that porch swing, in that moment of perfect peace, two broken people who'd learned to be whole again held each other close and believed in tomorrow. 6 months later, Maya graduated from her nursing program. Daniel and Ethan sat in the front row, Ethan holding a sign that said, "We love Nurse Maya," with drawings of hearts and what might have been stethoscopes or possibly snakes. It was hard to tell. When her name was called and she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, she looked out at them and saw her future. Daniel with tears in his eyes, Ethan bouncing in his seat with excitement, both of them clapping like she'd just won an Olympic medal. After the ceremony, Ethan ran to her, launching himself into her arms. "You did it! You're a real superhero now." "Thanks to you guys," she said, squeezing him tight. "You believed in me." Daniel approached more slowly, carrying a small wrapped box. "We got you something." Maya opened it carefully. Inside was a silver locket. When she opened it, her breath caught. On one side was a picture of her with Daniel and Ethan, all of them laughing in the treehouse. On the other side, engraved words, "You stepped forward, love, D and E." "Daniel," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We wanted you to remember," he said, "that on a scary night in a convenience store, when everything seemed dark, you were brave. You stood there and faced it. And somehow, that led us all here, to this." She threw her arms around him, clutching the locket in one hand. "Best graduation present ever," she said against his chest. That evening, they celebrated at Bernie's Diner, the place where it had all really begun. Ethan got chocolate ice cream again and made just as much mess as the first time. But now it felt like tradition, like coming home. As they left the diner, Ethan's hand in Maya's, Daniel's arm around her shoulders, Maya looked back at the window where she'd first sat across from them. The nervous woman who'd shown up that day had been looking for connection, for proof that good people existed. She'd found so much more. She'd found a family. "Mommy Maya?" Ethan said sleepily. He'd started calling her that a month ago, and every time it made her heart sore. "Can we go home now?" Home. Their home. The house where her toothbrush sat in the bathroom, where her books filled half a shelf, where she tucked Ethan in every night and kissed Daniel goodnight before sleep. "Yeah, sweetheart," she said, squeezing his hand. "Let's go home." And as they walked to the car under the streetlights, three people who'd found each other in the scariest of moments, they looked like what they were, a family built not on perfection, but on courage, kindness, and the simple choice to step forward when others stepped back. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is care. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. They wear work boots and aprons and show up when it matters most. And sometimes love finds you in the last place you'd expect, in the fluorescent lights of a convenience store, on the worst night of your life, when a stranger becomes your whole world. Thank you for walking this journey with us. If this story reminded you that courage comes in many forms, and that sometimes stepping forward changes everything, then subscribe to Lucky Encounters. We bring you stories where ordinary moments create extraordinary connections, where fear transforms into love, and where strangers become family. Until next time, remember, the bravest hearts are often the quietest ones. Click subscribe and check out the 2 stories on your screen for more heartfelt tales of hope, healing, and unexpected love.